What is the most misunderstood thing about being a spiritual leader in 2026?
So one of those issues is you have no idea that when you're trying to validate the existence of God, the impact of blessings in a scientific laboratory, how resistant scientists are to work with you. In that moment, this knowledge came to me. It felt like divine speaking to me without words. And divine was telling me that you were born on this planet to meet this person who is destined to be your husband. A lot of people think of why so many people have left religion. We don't see the numbers growing, we see them decreasing.
Welcome to the DebinaBonnerjee show. Today we are diving into a conversation that sits right at the intersection of science and spirituality. Joining us is international speaker and Divine Connection co-founder Dahryn Trivedi, whose work explores whether human consciousness can impact our health, well-being, and even the physical world around us, backed by thousands of scientific studies globally. Let's get straight into the conversation. So welcome to the DebinaBonnerjee show, Dahryn. And I'm sure we'll have a beautiful conversation today. But I would want to start with asking you, when did you feel first in your life that you are not going to follow a conventional path?
The age of 8.
8?
8.
What was that like?
Well, I'll say leading up to the age of 8, I had a very unique childhood from, I would say, most children's childhoods. And that when I was very young, like as early as I can remember, I had a lot of these, what I would call direct experiences with the divine. And for me, it was just moments in which I felt like I was absorbed into something bigger than myself. And in those states, I was overwhelmed with an incredible amount of love and ecstasy. And it was just like this bliss that permeated my entire being. And in that state, I felt like I just dissolved into something else. And I had no context for that. I grew up in a very religious family, but also very spiritual. So they're very open-minded. They weren't very dogmatic or strict about religion, but very Christian upbringing. And a lot of the religious texts and context that I had at the time, especially at that young age, right? A lot of what I was nurtured with, I didn't have an explanation for those experiences. So leading up to that, I had a familiarity because whenever I came back from those experiences, right, whatever was left within me felt like this is God, right? This is what God is like. This feels like God to me. And so I had that kind of baseline understanding of God. That was my reference point for life, was this is God. This is why I'm here, is I want more of that.
But you used to go to normal schools and normal, church functions. My father was a choir director, at Christian, many different Christian denominations of church. I had some experience with gurus and everything, but from that young age, I didn't have a lot of context for those types of things. So I had experiences very varied, especially at a much older age. My mother, took me to a lot of different people. And I tried a lot of different things, different healing modalities, all of that, but nothing really explained that experience to me. The closest I got to was the concept that God is love, that God is the purpose, that God is. I want to understand. You went for healing to heal what you were experiencing?
No, I went to healing to try and bring that experience back again.
Okay.
So I went to all these different leaders and all these different healers and all these different people to try and, because what happens is when you have such an incredible experience like that, right? And then eventually it fades away. It's not a continuous experience. So maybe over the course of a few hours or a few days, it fades. And there was nothing that I knew that brought it on. I had no idea. I was just in a deep state of peace and calmness whenever it came. Like that was the prerequisite for that state to come to me, but it was beyond my control. And so whenever that experience would come, I would have this glorious experience, this glorious perception, understanding, everything shifted within me. And then it would go away and it would feel like this incredible longing would take its place. And so this longing, I would call it soul sickness. It was this yearning to reconnect with that, to have that again.
And it fueled my life because it was something that complete and that potent. It's like normal happiness doesn't compare. So all the other happiness in life, all the other happiness other children had, nothing could touch it. So I wanted that more than anything. And so my mother saw this longing, as well as when you have that, it's also very hard to connect to other people, because not a lot of people can talk about that, and you don't know how to connect to other people in the same way. And so, yes, very lonely, not a lot of friends. So my whole life was this incredible loneliness, this longing, this sadness. And then on top of that, like I said, when I finally realized my life was for a different purpose was at the age of 8, where again, that experience came to me. I was actually, remember where I was at the exact moment it happened, and I was at school. You know, we call it recess. I don't know what you call it here, but it's when the children go out to play, a little break at school. We're all playing around. And I remember I was just sitting there enjoying my moment in nature. And then I felt this incredible stillness and this light come to me. And then it was this just knowing that came, which, you know, I call intuition. It's just this knowingness beyond logic or reason, but you know it's true without doubt. And so in that moment, this knowledge came to me. Right? It felt like divine speaking to me without words. And divine was telling me that you were born on this planet to meet this person who is destined to be your husband. Right? Divine picked out this person specifically for you. This is your path to meet this person, to marry him. And this person was an incredibly gifted being. I didn't understand really what the word enlightenment was, but that's kind of how God framed it, was this incredibly miraculous, gifted, enlightened being on this planet. And so, you know, I knew that that was my purpose, that I was waiting to meet this man. And so I lived my life trying to, you know, live appropriately, right? Trying to live with the highest level of ethics and morality, trying to be as pure and retain my innocence as much as possible. Because for me, that felt like that was how I connected to God the most, was when I was able to stay innocent and pure in heart. And so I you know, made all my activities, everything I did. I didn't do the things normal kids did my age. I didn't party, drink, smoke. I didn't even have sex, none of those things. I lived a very pure and almost like a monk-like life, waiting to meet this man. But the problem is, God never told me when I would meet this person or how it would happen.
But 8-year-old is so young, you know.
Yeah.
To even understand, you know, like you are going to get married to the person, or even we are never told, even a girl is never told about marriage at that time. You know, parents do not speak about it. I mean, eventually when they grow a little older, people start talking about marriages and all. Did you understand the whole concept that was happening to you?
I understood of marriage at that age. I understood that concept. I understood of a lot of those things. And at that age, you know, a lot of the kids my age were also developing crushes or talking about how they liked boys and things like that. And I remember just feeling, I don't feel in that way about anybody. Like, I don't have that connection or desire to connect with anybody, like as a form of a crush. And so I remember feeling like, you know, unable to like connect with people that way as well. So when that message came to me, I understood husband. I understood, because of my relationship with divine, that this person had that, right? So I already had the context to understand that message. It was already kind of inbuilt within me that, I get it. But the context that I was missing again was when and how. And that when and how, waiting for that, because I don't know. I like to say maybe it will happen on my deathbed. Like maybe that's when it'll happen. I know it'll come true, but when, I don't know. And so there was this, you know, kind of uncertainty in my life, and this anxiety and this depression that built over the years, you know, waiting for this man, longing for this, and this just sadness because I wanted God more and more and more. And it felt like the older I grew up, the less of those experiences I had. It's like it's so easy when you're a kid, but as you grow older, it's kind of like you start to feel a little more disconnected. So the experiences will still come, but it's like it wasn't as frequent as my childhood. And so
what eventually happened is my mother was noticing like this incredible, this weird isolated child who had no friends, who was very lonely, very depressed, very sad, right? And so she took me to a bunch of different, spiritual pathways to try and solve this problem or find me some healing. So I tried probably anything you could think of because my mom was very open-minded. She tried a lot of things. So she's like a hippie without the drugs. So she didn't, do any of the drugs, but she tried all these different people. And what I found across all of them is maybe some of them gave me some reprieve for like just a few days at a time, like a week at most. But I always went back to where I was before. The loneliness always came back. The longing always came back. The depression always persisted. My anxiety never went away. Right. And sometimes I didn't feel anything at all. So I never found a viable solution everywhere I went. I just found maybe short-term satisfaction at best. And so, but that was where, my mother took me to experience all these different things, which eventually led her, on a journey to find what she ended up finding was this incredible man, right, who was conducting blessings as well as scientific research to validate those blessings. Right, to prove their outcome, that God is scientific, not just faith-based, but a fact-based reality. And he was trying to demonstrate this as well as his abilities to bless and transform people, as well as non-living materials, living organisms, everything. And so she was amazed hearing this. She heard it from a friend of hers, so she went to go get a blessing. This was when I was almost 20 years of age. And so she got this blessing, and she had been struggling with her own relationship issues in her life. After one blessing, something that she had tried for decades to solve, decades to mend, right, to fix, nothing worked. After one blessing from this man, her relationships changed literally overnight. The very next day, everything was different. Things were harmonious, right? Her son was speaking cordially to her. Everything was like full of love, and there was a peace between them again. And there was always some issues between them in the past, and suddenly everything was just smoothed over overnight. And she was like, I've never experienced that anywhere. And so she's like, okay, I believe it. I believe whatever he's saying he can do, that he can do. And so seeing my own longing and this, state that I was in that nothing could solve, she gave me kind of an option for my 20th birthday, which was in January 30th, 2011. So she gave me this option. She was like, we don't have a lot of money. We're struggling financially. She said, we can, do a birthday party. I could get you a cake, a present. We can do all that. Or you can get a blessing from this man. She says that's, another option. I've seen the way you've been struggling. This is my experience. Would you like a blessing? And so immediately I was like, yes, I don't care about all those other things. I want that blessing. And she was taking me to meet him. On the car ride there, I actually remember thinking in my head, right, kind of like a fantasy thought, that wouldn't it be funny if I was going to get a blessing from this man to bring this person into my life that I was going to marry? And it turned out that this was that man. That I was actually meeting him today. But I laughed it off because I thought it was fantasy, and that's it. And it was very soon after I'd actually met him, right? And I got a blessing from him that I realized, no, he's that person. He's the same person I was waiting to meet my whole life. And so it was around that same year in July 2011 that we got married. And then less than a year later, he nurtured me through his blessings. I attained enlightenment myself in March 2012.
How beautiful. Oh my God. It's like the whole thing just running in front of my eyes like a film. But I would want to know the struggles in between. Like, did you ever want a normal life like other people?
No. I wanted friends. I wanted connection. I wanted to be able to connect with other people, to enjoy that. But everything else I had no desire for. So, nothing.
And what was the biggest moment of doubt in your journey?
The biggest moment of doubt. I mean, I don't really feel like I ever doubted any part of that journey. It was again, the biggest doubt was just when and how. That was the biggest doubt, was like, am I going to have to wait forever for this to happen, or will it happen soon? So that was my only questioning moment. And the only thing that brought about that kind of uncertainty and that kind of anxiety within me was this not knowing when and how it would happen. And so I didn't want to wait my whole life to meet this man. I wanted it to happen sooner than later. So that was the only struggle I really faced with that journey.
And what is the most misunderstood thing about being a spiritual leader in 2026?
This actually has multiple different answers to it, and I'd like to address it. One of those issues is from the scientific community. So one of those issues is you have no idea that when you're trying to validate the existence of God, right, the existence of consciousness as the fundamental reality, the impact of blessings in a scientific laboratory, how resistant scientists are to work with you. Right? My husband, my guru, right? One of the things that I heard about in the car ride there to meeting him was how he was validating the existence of God. And for me, I always thought my whole life, I'm like, that makes sense. It's like, why can't God be validated scientifically? And I was amazed that somebody was actually doing it for the first time, like so thoroughly and so extensively, not just like one vague study, but like 6,000 science experiments he's conducted. Like collectively, all of us have conducted 6,000 science experiments to validate this. Not a single one has failed. And so I like to say how incredible that was, that someone was seeking, like not just scientists coming to them and saying, hey, you're claiming you have these abilities, you're claiming supernatural power, or you're claiming God is real, but where's the proof? When in fact, he's actually going out there and looking for scientists and saying, test my abilities, test this, let's create something scientific, something real, something empirical. I had never heard anyone who had done that. Nobody. And so for me, hearing that, it was just such an emotional experience for me, because I was like there's something very exotic. You take an Indian guru from, the East, dressed in saffron robes with long hair, right? You put them in the West and he automatically has a following. You have no idea how easy it would be for him to come. And he was already established in India. He had politicians, senators, entrepreneurs. He had people from the Bollywood industry, distributors, producers, actors, actresses. He already had a well-established basis with thousands of people who supported him, revered him. He had wealth, status, name, fame. All those things were already credited to him. And he literally threw all of those away. At the same time, he threw his saffron robes away, cut his hair short, went to a scientist and said, let's do this. He gave up all of that, the ultimate sacrifice. He gave up his whole name and stature, and instead sought authenticity and legitimacy, integrity as a human being, and integrity in the work that he does, because he saw all of the false teachers out there who were taking advantage, right, of the void that science is able to take place within, religious and spiritual territory. And he sees all the charlatans, all the scam artists, all the people who abuse, all the people who take advantage, all the people who maybe have good intentions but ultimately give false hope and leaves people with just expectations and no outcome. So he's taking all of this, witnessing all of it around him and wondering, am I falling into any of those categories, or is what I have real? Why should we only trust human testimonial? Why can this not be proven with non-living materials? Why can't this be applied to organisms? Why can't this work on viruses, bacteria, fungi? Why can't this work on metal, ceramics, polymers, plants, trees? All these things should be able to be affected. If we're talking about God here, this is the substrate of existence. This is the creator. The creator can alter and affect all of these things. So why has nobody who's claimed to be enlightened, who's claimed to be connected to that authority, been able to implement it scientifically? Right? Because of religion's inability to implement it scientifically, it's remained a faith-based institution, a faith-based establishment, which is why science ignores all the testimonials that come from religious experience and spiritual experience, because nothing's been proven. So it's all just limited to psychology and placebo. And so I understood, first of all, how big that journey was, how incredible that mission is, and at the same time, how incredibly painful, because he is dealing with an establishment that has been here for decades, that has gripped onto so much of our society, our culture, our politics, our medicine, everything. And he's basically saying the whole basic understanding, the whole principles of science is based on something that's incorrect. So he's changing the whole underpinnings of science and reality itself. He's changing it on its head in real time. And he's already done so. It's effectively done. It's not something we're trying to do. We've done it. I'm just sharing it now because we spent decades trying to do this. And now we finally have enough scientific research to talk about it. Right? So that's the only reason people are hearing about it for the first time. But that kind of scrutiny from the scientific community, we had scientists that rejected to work with us simply because they heard the word God and blessing, and they refused. They said, this is ridiculous. And then we've had scientists, literally, this is just recently, after already having 6,000 science experiments, over 670 peer-reviewed publications, right? And these are indexed. These are widely recognized all over the world. These are available in institutions like MIT, Harvard, Cambridge, Oxford, right? The National Institutes of Health index our publications. And on top of that, this is available in over 3,000 universities in over 100 countries, right? So this is, well documented, well established, very credible. And we still have scientists that have just recently, one of them has rejected one of our publications on one of our clinical trials because they say they've sent it to 9 different reviewers. There's a team of reviewers where you have a whole bunch of PhD level scientists who, when you submit a publication, right, when you submit an article for publication based upon your scientific experiment, and they assess it, they read through it, they check the materials and methods, they look for any errors, any improper procedures, anything done incorrectly, or any improper conclusions, anything at all. They review all of it, make sure it is ready to publish, that there's no issues, no red flags, and then they approve it. He sent it to 4, this editor sent it to 4 PhD level scientists. All of them approved it. All of them were amazed by the results, unprecedented results. But he didn't stop at 4. Usually you stop at 4. He sent it to 5 more scientists to review. And every time they approved it. 5 of them continued to approve it. So we have 9 approvals from PhD level scientists, but the editor, before publishing the paper, rejected it. Why? Because he simply could not believe that the results were real. He said the results were so extraordinary, so out of this world, so beyond conventional scientific means that he insisted this is not something that can happen. I disagree. I feel like there's something wrong here. There's no way that you can get these results, especially long distance blessing and getting such an incredible outcome, not possible. So for that reason alone, our paper was rejected, even though it was approved 9 times by PhD level scientists. So it's been a hard journey. It hasn't been easy. And then on top of that, you're dealing with a lot of people who, you can imagine, have issues with the type of organization where you look at someone like me, for example. You look at a white American woman, in a dress with makeup on, hair curled, and you can't imagine how someone like that could be enlightened. People have their own dogmas, their own beliefs that you're working with, that no matter how much science you even put in front of them, even those people who believe have a hard time believing in what your institution represents because they have a specific idea about God, or they have a specific belief system or specific image of enlightenment, and this goes against that image, and so that's enough for them to reject it as well. So,
do you think it is also important to, go with people's psychology? Like, this is how it is always represented, so we should take that path to get into the heart. And like they say, with God, it's renunciation.
Right.
That's how it is always seen as,
Right.
throughout.
100%.
You renounce the world because you have this spirituality in you.
Right.
But looking at you, I do not see that like the renouncing the world kind of, exactly what you said.
Mm-hmm.
Like looking at you, you feel beautiful. And that is very contradicting, or very, contradicting to the idea that people have about spiritual people. I mean, they have renounced the world. They wear different clothes. They don't wear makeup. They have very plain hair, as if their only motto is God and
Right.
nothing else. So I want to know that.
Well, renunciation, right? There's the physical act of renunciation, there's the behavior-based renunciation, and there's real renunciation. Real renunciation just means no attachment, right? That doesn't mean you can't wear makeup, you can't put on a dress, you can't do all those things. It means that you don't have attachment to it, right? You're comfortable in any situation. That's what renunciation means. There's so many gurus in the past who've talked about, who've tried to go against conventional norms of even spirituality, saying like so many people believe you can't have a family, you can't be married, you can't have children, and still become enlightened and still follow this path. And many gurus have talked against that. So many people you would imagine that if that was the key to enlightenment, there would be a lot more enlightened people on this planet, wouldn't there? Because there are a lot of renunciants. Not all of them are enlightened. And that's the thing. You can get also attached to the idea of renunciation and reject God, which is fully present in front of you in every single person, in beauty itself, and in the act of living life. God exists in everything. We've established that scientifically. That God is real and God exists in everything. So why can't God exist in beauty itself? Why can we not have any appreciation or value for that? So I don't think there's anything wrong with it. And I feel like that's the exact reason why we're here, is to challenge perception, because it's perception that's really the block, the path between people and divine, is this perception modality. It's this idea of what God is and how we get to God. And what we've shown is that true enlightenment, when you're enlightened, it can be demonstrated scientifically. So it's not just a claim that, yes, we are enlightened. It's an actual scientific reality that we've been able to take enlightenment and show what is enlightenment. Enlightenment, you can say your consciousness has merged, into that totality with the Creator. Well, what does that mean? That means your consciousness has evolved to the point where it has now evolved beyond the consciousness of nature. Nature has its own consciousness. Right? What can nature do? Nature can create new materials. It can create new species, right? It created the laws of physics, all the laws we see, all the things we're bound to, right? Body temperature, gravity, all these things are created by nature. It surely, if we have the authority, if we're connected to that source, then we can have influence over all of those things. As enlightened beings, we should be able to create new materials in a laboratory. We should be able to create new species. And we've done exactly that. We have created new materials. We changed the atomic structure at the nucleus level, nuclear transformation. We've created new species. We've transformed bacteria. We've mutated bacteria. We've created new things that only nature has been given the authority and power to do. And we've shown that, yes, through this blessing, through enlightened consciousness, we can enact the same scientifically and measure the outcome. That's the beauty of it, is that truly enlightened beings, the outcome is measurable. If it's really God, like I said, God is fact-based. God is not only living within people's minds. It's not only something psychological. God created all of this. God is fact. God is a scientific reality just as much as a spiritual and religious phenomena. So if you can do that, prove it scientifically, then I think that validates more than anything someone's enlightenment.
So creating and mutating, I mean, I somehow feel, there can be different effects of it. Like, if taken in a positive way, like you can actually mutate a bad disease,
Right.
cure it from
Right.
earth. But if it is, if it goes in the wrong direction, I mean, it becomes as powerful as, creating something which could be against humanity. So maybe that is the fear.
There's none of that in terms of when we're getting into the nature of consciousness. So what consciousness is, let me go over that real quick. Consciousness is the fundamental reality of everything. Right? God created the entire universe and everything within it, all of its ingredients, all of its components, out of nothing. Right? That's the origin story from all religions and all spiritual, philosophy, is that God created something out of nothing. Right? Nothing existed before. And so what is that something that was created? How did that come to be? Well, God created this out of nothing to reveal his or her glory, right? His existence, God's existence. That something is consciousness that created it. It's that intention. It's that, decision making. It's that intelligence behind everything that tells what kind of life you'll live. It's the organizing, regulating, and governing principle of our lives. It tells an atom what it will become. It tells a cell, from the womb, what it will organize and evolve and become and turn into by the time you have a baby and you deliver that baby, right? It's consciousness that gives that inherent intelligence that tells everything what to do and what will it become. Now, the issues with that is when you have lower levels of consciousness, right? The whole purpose and function of consciousness is to organize systems, evolve them, right? When there's more consciousness, there's more of that organizing and evolving principle there. And that always leads to that organism or that recipient evolving for its highest potential, which means it always organizes and evolves for its best usefulness, its greatest potency, its greatest value, its greatest worth, its greatest quality of life. It's always working for your benefit and the benefit of humanity. Because that is what God wants. That is what this consciousness wants. It wants its own freedom. It seeks its own freedom. So it organizes our lives in such a way that we are able to embody that freedom more and more. And think about, when have you felt the most free in your life? Is when you're happy, is when you're calm, is when things are at peace, when your health is good. When all of those things are taken from you, you feel a slave to life. You feel disempowered. Your mind is in chaos. It's in havoc. All of these things are indications of lower intensities in consciousness or lower levels of consciousness, lower states of evolution, right? So more consciousness never damages. It always benefits. That's its nature. That's what it does. So these reverse mutations that you see, right, cancer, all these things that happen, which are gross mutations of something that was inherently good to begin with, those are indications of low levels of consciousness, not more consciousness, less. So what this blessing does is it adds more consciousness. It increases the intensity of consciousness, which leads to that evolution. And consciousness knows what to do. It knows your problems. It also knows how to solve those problems. So it knows everything about you. It knows what to do. It's God. It's grace. It's divine grace. That's what it is. Divine grace always assists for your greatest growth.
What is your day like? Is it like a normal people or is it completely different?
Well, I would say this work is my whole life, and obviously I'm serving my guru at the same time, right? My husband. And so my life is probably different from most people's lives, but I still, do same things that everybody else does. I eat, I sleep, I do all those things, but I just have this mission behind everything I do. It's what I wake up doing. It's what I go to sleep doing. It's what I'm constantly doing from the moment I'm conscious to the moment I'm asleep at night. So I don't think it's like an ordinary life. I think it's very different from other people's, but, it just looks like a normal person, really, on the outside.
So you always talk about consciousness. So how does consciousness affect the biology? And what does that even mean in the simplest way? I want to know, like, for people who have no idea as to what we are talking about, let's just start from the beginning. How consciousness affects the biology in the simplest way?
So in the simplest way, right, consciousness, it essentially takes care of everything, but it starts off with working on, I would say, with your cognition and motor function first, right? It addresses that part of you, because neuroscience says when the brain is orderly, where your thoughts are orderly, when your thoughts are orderly, your actions are orderly. Everything is ultimately constructed at the level of the mind first. So when it works at the level of biology, what it first does, higher levels of consciousness, gives you the ability to reach states of calmness, mental peace, basically stability within the mind, more coherence, more clarity, more vision, more enthusiasm, more motivation. It gives you this sense of control over your thoughts, right? Whereas opposed to before, your thoughts control you. And that is honestly the host of all of the mental and emotional health problems, as well as all the physical problems we're witnessing today. Because there's this root cause of disease, this theory that Harvard has come up with, which says that there's this idea inflammation is the underlying root cause of all disease. Okay? And where does inflammation really come from? What is the greatest source of inflammation in our modern life?
Stress.
Stress. And where does stress come from?
From our mind.
The mind. But we have no control of the mind. Until today, science has no real solutions, no ways to manage stress. That's the best we have come up with, is managing stress, right? But from lower levels of consciousness, imagine you're carrying a bunch of different things and somebody asks you to do something. How can you carry all these things and then help them as well and add on that extra task to it? It's an overburden. Right? That chaos that's within the mind, that's like being overburdened with too much, right? There's too many uncontrolled, wild thoughts running through all of our minds all the time. We are enslaved by these thoughts constantly. That is the root cause of mental restlessness, the root cause of anxiety, the root cause of depression, the root cause of all of the mental illnesses you see today that are rising rampantly, right? Despite the stigma of mental health decreasing, all these mental health problems are increasing. More people are attending therapy, more people taking drugs, more people have mental health problems than ever before. So we haven't found one conventional solution that can target everybody universally. There's not one solution that can do that. The best we've come up with is manage your stress. Somehow manage it, get by. Stress is inevitable. You can't avoid stress, but you manage it. But how can you manage it when your mind is in that state? So what we've seen is from higher levels of consciousness, right? The mind becomes a lot more coherent. It becomes a lot more organized because that's what consciousness does, organizes and evolves. So in that state, the mind is more capable, right? It's capable of receiving that stress and not letting it get affected by it. It doesn't register that same impact, right? So this leads to that, right, deeper sleep, better quality of life, right? Lower levels of inflammation. Another issue that we're seeing today is this rapid increase of Alzheimer's, dementia, all these mental health problems that eventually lead to age-related and neurodegenerative diseases that are all, again, inflammatory based. They all come back to inflammation within the body, right? You have good quality sleep, you have a peaceful mind, you have, good quality health, all these things, you see lower levels of inflammation. All of these things are under control. The body knows how to heal itself. The body's not ignorant. The body knows what to do. So does the mind. When everything's functioning correctly, the body and the mind know exactly what they need to do. You fall down, you cut your leg, you don't need to tell your knee what to do to heal itself. It knows what to do.
Yeah.
Right? But there's so many diseases and things that we have no control over, and science has no solution. It's because that force that tells it how to heal itself is at a very low, right, insignificant level to be able to operate fully at full capacity, to be able to heal our bodies and heal our minds. So the exact mechanism by which it operates in the body, we can't pinpoint one because it's a whole system effect what consciousness does. But the easiest way we can see it trickle down through is when the brain is orderly, your thoughts are orderly. When your thoughts are orderly, your actions are orderly. Quality of life. It facilitates all of these things, which helps with our quality of life and our state of mind and everything associated with it. Our relationships, our finances, everything you can think of all benefit from it.
Energy can change DNA or cell behavior. Why is it not mainstream medicine yet?
Because there are not a lot of people who have been able to demonstrate it and do it scientifically. That's why it's not mainstream. Science, if we look at what science believes, that the main reason it's not mainstream is because we've not been able to validate this before. Right?
So you think modern medicine is ignoring the ability of consciousness?
It's not ignoring it. The fundamental understanding of it is incorrect. So what science believes about consciousness, science thinks that consciousness is a byproduct of the brain, right? That's the key issue here. That's why science has reached so many limits and max capacity in its ability to create good quality, food products, for our ability to bring about, solutions for our mental and emotional health crisis, to, do all these basic things that we're seeing today to evolve our technology, right? We're at capacity with a lot of these things. And we see that with the number of people who are actually losing, creating a level of distrust within the scientific community. Whereas before, at the time of Galileo, when science and religion split, right? Science accepted more of a material-based reality where everything is mechanical and chemical, right? Religion still insisted that, no, there's spirit, there's God, there's the soul, right? That's how God is, but has not been able to take it and reproduce it within a scientific setting. So with this division between science and religion, right? Science accepting a material-based reality and religion accepting, a spiritual reality, something with spirit and maybe consciousness, but it hasn't really pinpointed consciousness as how God works in the world. And science acknowledges that consciousness exists, but it has missed out on God.
So can belief alone heal diseases?
No, it can't. And we've seen that with what belief has been limited to within religion, right? A lot of people think of why so many people have left religion, right? We don't see the numbers growing, we see them decreasing, right? Because we've seen the limits of belief. We've seen the limits of a faith-based God and a faith-based institution, right? Religion, unable to give outcomes scientifically, has lost its rapport within, the masses. Right. So as a result, what do? We see something that's giving tangible outcomes, very short-term outcomes, like something that happens immediately. Right. You follow religion, it's like, follow these rituals and dogmas and practices and things that might not even give you an outcome until you die. Right. There's like some people, a long time ago, they believed that if you lived a good life and followed, everything correctly, that God won't reward you in this life, God will reward you after you die in the afterlife. Then you get to go to heaven. Then you reap all the benefits. No, consciousness gives you benefits here in this life. It changes your quality of life. It changes the trajectory. It transforms your fate and fortune. It does so many things across every area of your life. So no, it's not limited to after you die. You can experience the glory of God's creation now, right, through consciousness. And so religion has been unable to prove that scientifically. So people have left that, followed the tangible outcome, followed technology, followed medicine, right, antibiotics, surgeries. We have computers, we have AC systems, right? We're able to record these podcasts and send it out to the entire world. We've seen the outcome and the efficacy and the power that science has been able to deliver us. Right? So we have trust with it. It's gained enough rapport with us that we rely on it sometimes more than religion. So you see, especially with the new generation, the younger generation, more of them are leaving religion than ever before. They might not have denounced God yet, but they've left religion. They've seen older generations following the same rituals and dogmas and living the same lives they always have with very little outcome. And they've said these people don't know what they're doing. They think they're crazy. Right? They think that they're living, with futility and just wasting their time and energy. And so they go to science. There's more there. And science has not really proven God. So there's not really this basis for the existence of God there either. So we're going off of this existence of a very materialistic way of life, a very material living, right? Chemical, mechanical, technological, and we've kind of denounced the spirit, the God. That's why I like to say we're putting the soul back into science. That's what our organization, right? It's a nonprofit organization called Divine Connection International. And its sole purpose is what we have done is we've linked the missing link, that missing connection that both religion and science have failed to properly, connect and demonstrate. And that's the connection and the relationship between God, consciousness, and matter, how they all interact and work together, and how the results you can actually have them now.
Where does placebo end and consciousness begin?
So I'm so glad you asked that, because that is one of the main reasons why we have, first of all, applied these blessings. That's how we deliver this, right? That's the application scientifically, is we administer a blessing, which is basically just, right, an intention through enlightened consciousness to evolve, right? Bring more consciousness into the recipient, evolve the recipient. Now, what happens is, if this is something that's placebo, do you think a placebo would affect a non-living material?
No.
Would a placebo affect this table here? If you blessed this table and transformed it, would it be influenced psychologically?
No.
No. Well, would a plant?
Maybe. Plant, I'm not sure.
Maybe. We haven't really seen enough to really say. We have animals maybe microscopically affected by psychology, but not enough, not to the same degree humans are. There's a reason why all these institutions have limited outcome to human psychology. There's a reason why they hesitate when it comes to applying it to material science, right? Because that's a lot more empirical, a lot more objective, a lot more analytical and hard to demonstrate, because there's no psychology there whatsoever. You don't see it in microbes. You don't see it in bacteria, viruses, fungi, plants, and trees. We apply it to animals. We've applied it to metals, ceramics, polymers, chemicals, literally so many different avenues, disciplines of science, life sciences and material science, and they all, regardless of their psychologies or their beliefs, have unprecedented outcome. They've all demonstrated something scientifically. We have over 4,000 science experiments in material science alone. Each one of them demonstrating miraculous outcomes, changing the very structure of the atom, altering physical constants, right? Things that science says cannot change until you apply an external energy or force to it. We've been able to change just by waving our hands, right? The power of God can change that. Science till today has not been able to permanently alter the atom, right? With a lot of power it can destroy it, but it cannot permanently alter the atom, right? At the nucleus level especially. And when you alter the atom, right, you're altering the building block of the material itself. And atoms compose everything. They compose you and me, as well as all living materials and non-living materials, everything visible, invisible that you see, everything's composed of atoms. If you can alter the atom, you can alter just about everything. And on top of that, you alter the atom, right? You can make the atom bigger. You can make it smaller. We've seen all of these things scientifically using the most sophisticated technologies that even NASA uses, right? So we're following all the correct, procedures and methods using, even blinding protocols in some experiments, right? We've conducted real, legitimate, right, gold standard level experiments to exclude placebo in psychology. Moreover, we've also conducted these in clinical trials and intentionally aware of the possibility of psychological influence in placebo, right? We've conducted about 4 clinical trials so far, hundreds of participants. And in each clinical trial, we've had always a control group, which is a group that's not receiving the blessing or the treatment, right? That's what we called a treatment. Or we have a placebo group, a placebo control. So the placebo group is the group that is maybe getting a blessing, but not really, right? It's the sham healer, the sham guru. That's, where they think they're getting a blessing, but they're not really. So we're measuring psychology as well as a baseline. And then we're comparing both of those groups with the treated group who's getting the real thing. So we're comparing data across all 3 different groups and measuring the outcome as a comparative to that. And we're seeing unprecedented results you've never seen, even in comparison to the psychological groups. And in several clinical trials, let me point this out too, because this is a very important point. One of our clinical trials, we tested over 100 parameters in blood. And some of those parameters are very difficult to influence, even psychologically, right? Even with their best methods, best therapies, best drugs out there, some of these things do not get influenced to this degree, even psychologically, but even when you administer a real hardcore drug or therapy, even they don't get influenced that much. And we've seen outcomes that exceed even those conventional methods, even other alternative and complementary methods.
I'm very curious to know which.
So one of them, have you heard of the clotho protein? I like to give this example because it's such a huge difference. Are you familiar with the clotho protein?
No, not.
So the clotho, Klotho, clotho protein, it's a biomarker for anti-aging.
Okay.
The more clotho you have, the more longevity in your life you have. It's an indication that if you've increased your clotho, you've probably either, slowed down your aging or even reversed your aging, right? Science has always struggled with anti-aging. Right, we might be able to make ourselves look better as we age, but it's nearly impossible for us to prevent aging itself. Clotho is the key to that, science believes. And with all the best therapies and drugs we have available to us, we've been able to increase it marginally, right? A few percentage points, that's it. with these blessings, we've been able to see nearly 700% improvement in the clotho protein, 685% to be exact. Unheard of, impossible data. And then we're seeing things like oxytocin, dopamine. We're measuring neurotransmitters. We're measuring insulin. We're measuring your ability to absorb vitamins and minerals, right? Your cholesterol levels. All of these things we're measuring. A lot of these things, inflammation. We have inflammation, biomarkers to show that
HbA1c, or everything can be changed. Like
all of these things are changed. All of these things are altered. All of these things we've tested have all been altered with the effect of this blessing for the benefit, anti-aging, anti-inflammatory conditions, better nutrient absorption, right? Better hormonal states of being, right? We're talking improvements in hormones. There is no drug or therapy that can completely, rebalance your entire hormonal system, maybe target specific pathways, but there's nothing that targets the whole path. There's nothing that fixes your entire endocrine system. And this blessing puts the body back into stability. It puts the body back into balance. Estrogen, testosterone, we're measuring everything, right? Within these 100 parameters of blood samples that we have. This is unheard of, undocumented, never been documented before until now. And then on top of that, so this is just one of those clinical trials. The other ones, we've even gone so far as to conduct it remotely. So we're located within the United States, right? In, like, for example, Florida, and the participants are located in lab in India. And this is double blinded, right? These are the gold standards of clinical trials, right? Double blinding is always the best, but randomized controlled clinical trials, all of them are randomized and controlled. And these last 3 were double blinded as well, meaning that the investigators had no idea who was getting blessed. Right? So there's no bias involved, even in the investigative process. And there's no bias within us. We don't know which group's getting the blessing. I don't know what their problems are. I don't know their names. I don't know what they look like. I know nothing about these people. All I know is I'm blessing a lab in India, and that's it. Right? And then even the recipients, right? So everybody's being blinded in this whole scenario, and we still have the control, placebo, and treated groups as well. And with these particular clinical trials, we've measured results. All of these, we're doing psychological assessments as well by a third-party, clinician who's licensed to do this kind of work. And all of this is third-party, so it's not like our own group of scientists or anything like that. All of these are conducted with, multinational, even, some of them are, multi-million-dollar, third-party institutions who are highly accredited and, function in multiple different, nations all over the world. So they're highly reputable organizations as well. And these results that we've seen with the psychological assessment, we're conducting studies on people who have severe mental and emotional health problems, things like anxiety, depression, ADD, ADHD, chronic fatigue, low energy. And with women specifically, we're targeting women who have like severe issues with their menstrual cycle. So like heavy bleeding, cramps, mood swings, instability, all those types of things that you get, that we are taught are normal, but actually aren't. We can talk about that as well. And then on top of that, we're also, measuring assessments based upon their relationships, right? Their environment, how they feel about their relationships, as well as how people feel about them. So, third-party validation from these people's own lives, how people respond to them, how they see the changes in them as well. And then we're also taking that and we're measuring something called the NIH Toolbox for Cognition and Motor Function. Now, the NIH Toolbox, this is like, again, gold standard for clinical trials, established and utilized since 2012 in all clinical trials. It's, first of all, used to remove any subjective data, keep things as objective as possible. And then on top of that, it is probably one of the most utilized toolboxes, mainly to see if there's an adverse effect of a drug or therapy, because it's very rare that you see benefits, right, reflected in the cognition and motor function of participants in clinical trials. Usually it's just there to see if there's any toxicity issues or issues with the drug or therapy, if it has a bad effect on your cognition or your motor function. Now, and within these tests, we're conducting multiple tests in each one. So in the cognition studies, we're testing things like memory, executive function, language and vocabulary, right? We're talking, in motor function, we're dealing with endurance, dexterity, grip strength, locomotion, right? We're targeting, and many more, but we're targeting many different areas of cognition, motor function. And what we're seeing is that for the first time in a clinical trial, in nearly every single tested parameter from the NIH toolbox for cognition and motor function, nearly 100% improvement across the board. It's never been done before. So our clinical trials are the first to reflect that clinically. And these tests, these assessments, so the server is located in the United States, and everything's randomized. The investigators are participants. Nobody can guess or assume what question will come up next, what the program will come up with. It's completely random. And then the moment your answer is put in, it's locked in place and stored in that server in the United States. There's no manipulation. There's no ability to change data or do anything different to it. So this is probably the most sincere reflection of the outcome of what these blessings can do with psychology and placebo removed entirely from the equation. So we're talking significant, huge results. And then you see this reflected in their psychological data from the psychological assessments, where all of their psychological problems from the beginning of the clinical trial, from day 0 to day 180, right? All of them resolved. All of them disappeared completely.
This change can happen only psychologically, that over the distance, or even in blood work?
No, even in blood work. And the NIH toolbox for cognition and motor function, it's not psychological data. This is your mind and your body. So this is something that's like, what your nervous system, what your whole body is capable. This is reflections of better quality of life, better quality of health, right? This comes first, then your mental peace, then psychology improves. So it's like what neuroscience says. First, right, the structure of the brain alters, right? This is an indication that the structure of the brain itself is reorganizing itself. That's why they have better cognition. That's why they have better ability to think. They have better decision. All of these things we tested and also reflected psychologically. How do you feel about your decision-making abilities? Are you able to make better decisions? Is your thinking clearer than it was before, right? All of these things we're measuring, and they're showing that, yes, as reflected in the NIH toolbox, they're also being reflected psychologically in how they feel, how they're functioning, right? How it reflects psychologically as well. So this comes first, and the psychological, implications is downstream from that. And then you see this also ripple out into all the other aspects of their lives. So they have more energy levels. They have better relationships. You have people who, I remember, in some of the data, we're having women who's never, felt validated or appreciated their entire lives, who felt rejected by everybody, who felt like their in-laws hated them, right? All this kind of data, these horrible experiences they were having, and suddenly, right, their family loves them. They're getting appreciation from their husband. Their children are valuing what they do. They have gratitude. It's like this ripples out into every aspect of their lives, right? The people who are breadwinners in their family, most of them are men in India, right? But a lot of the breadwinners, who are earning an income, you saw their income double, triple, quadruple after the blessing, right? So this is completely, there's no other answer for it. The only thing that changed in their lives, they didn't change their lifestyle. They didn't change anything. The only thing that changed in their lives was the fact that they got this blessing.
So is a meditation required, or is it something else?
No, meditation is not required. It's simply your connection to divine. Meditation is a process, right? True meditation is when you have command over your thoughts. The difference between practicing meditation and being in meditation is practicing meditation is, again, it's a practice, it's a behavior. True meditation is when the thoughts stop. So that only can be affected by consciousness. You can't affect things, that operate upstream from downstream. You can't, make water go from, downhill to uphill. It doesn't work that way. Right? You have to alter the programming first before the programming can reflect that change. You can't reverse engineer that. There is no behavior-based modality that can alter consciousness. Only consciousness can do that. Only your relationship to God can do that. God is the only one that has any effect on consciousness.
These blessings, they happen like these experiments that you have done. It has happened like for what period of time? Like,
so it depends on the study because everything has its own time period. For the clinical trials, right, we did it over a course of 180 days. Okay. Right. And they received 2 blessings. So one on baseline, day 0. And we also measured, everybody's results from when they first came to day 90 and then day 180 at the end of the clinical trial. And they only received 2 blessings, day 0 and day 90. So we measured over the course of 180 days to see the effects of the blessing on their, psychology, the NIH toolbox, as well as those blood parameters. And then when we're getting into things like, materials and bacteria and crops, everything has its own time period, right? Like for some crops, it takes maybe like a year or 2 for it to truly, reach a stage where you can measure the outcome of its fruiting period and all those things. So it really depends on what you're measuring in terms of the study.
Can consciousness affect fertility as well?
We haven't done specific tests on fertility, but I can't imagine how it wouldn't. If God can change the atom, God can surely change your fertility. We've seen huge improvements with, your hormones, as well as huge improvements with menstrual cycle problems. So if God can do those things, if higher consciousness creates changes with those areas, especially in women's health, then surely God can have a great effect on fertility. And in fact, there was a case study. So this is a testimonial, right, on a specific woman who was struggling with fertility for years of her life. And she finally, during menopause, literally during menopause, how many women do you think get pregnant during menopause? Well, because of the blessing, she was able to, first of all, get pregnant. And on top of that, she delivered twins while in menopause. So we've already seen successful case studies of people who have had good outcomes, but we've had no clinical trials specifically on fertility, but everything else is very promising to suggest otherwise.
Can emotional trauma pass into the body?
Absolutely. Emotional trauma, it's something, like I said, everything that's happening on a mental and psychological level, all of these things don't actually exist in the world. It's purely our state of mind. We are controlled and operated by, all the thoughts that come and go. So this huge influx of restlessness, this huge influx of unwanted and uncontrolled thoughts, right, decides our state of mind, right? And so this state of mind ultimately determines, whether we get emotionally traumatized or not. There are situations in which, maybe you might not get trauma from it, but other people will. What's the difference between the two of you? Why would some situation traumatize one person and not another? It's your state of mind. It's how things are reflected within you psychologically. And then the same thing, when we see issues at the level of the mental and emotional, right, we also see that reflected within your biology, within your physiology. So you get huge, influx of inflammation, right? Cortisol, everything brings in huge amount of inflammation. When inflammation becomes chronic, it's the root cause of disease that Harvard suggests might be true, right? And so if this is the root cause of disease and all the disorders and diseases you see today are all inflammatory based, then one can only suggest that emotional trauma is more than psychological. It is quality of life. It is an indicator that if you have severe trauma, you're probably not living at your peak, even physically as well. I mean, it's huge suffering. Emotional trauma is the root cause of massive amounts of suffering, especially among women.
So can a mother's mental state impact the child biologically beyond genetics?
Yeah. If the child is high enough in consciousness, then maybe not. But there are many studies, not ones that we've specifically conducted, but there are many studies, for example, on mice that suggest that, beliefs and experiences, these things actually get passed down genetically, right? So these mice were taught to not like the smell of cherry blossom, right? Very subjective, right? And totally experience-based. And what they found is, without ever smelling cherry blossom, when these rats reproduced, these mice reproduced, right? And more generations of mice, came through down the line, the mice from those further generations away from the ones that actually experienced the aversion to cherry blossom had those same aversion to cherry blossom without ever experiencing it or being around it its whole life, just suddenly put in that same environment and had the same aversion to it. So yes, there are many indicators that a lot of these things biologically are passed down to us from our parents and from, our whole lineage of ancestors before us. But consciousness, the beauty of it is consciousness has the ability to kind of deprogram us, to instill a new programming within us. So if you have a child that's high enough in consciousness, then maybe it won't struggle with those same issues that you will, right? It'll be a very different child on this planet. That's the beauty of consciousness, is that we've seen, when you look at a material, for example, and you see the physical constants change, right? It's now living a new existence. It's now living a new life. It has a new destiny, and it's reflected in its behavior and the character it has. It's a completely different thing on this planet. And you see the same thing with the people from the clinical trial, with the different cognition and motor function, right? Different physical ability, right? This different level of health and well-being that they didn't have before. What is this? This is a new quality of life. This is a new life. That's what a lot of people say, is it feels like they've been given a new life. So this is an alteration, not just in quality of life. This is truly an alteration in your destiny. It's in your fate and fortune. This is something beyond DNA and beyond, we've seen even alterations at genetic levels, at the level of the DNA. So this is something, like I said, consciousness that programs DNA. It's the DNA of DNA.
So the consciousness that you're talking about, is it a spiritual practice, or you just get it once and you are, you're good to go for life?
No. So how we conduct these studies, like I said, is through divine blessings, which is coming from somebody who's evolved their consciousness to the point where they're enlightened, right? Which means their consciousness has risen above the consciousness of nature, right? So how we are able to see these transformative effects is by, like the enlightened, you could say, work as kind of like a jumper cable or a conduit, right? All they're doing is really jump-starting that connection. They're facilitating that kind of transformation, right? While consciousness is inherent in each and every one of us, it's very hard for us to evolve and transform it on our own. So sometimes we need that external assistance from somebody who's already established, who has that higher source, that higher connection, right? And you say, energy always follows, from a higher dimension to a lower dimension. That's a law of physics. So this higher dimension, this is, coming from the source, coming from authority. This is enlightened consciousness. So they have the ability to, you could say, increase the intensity of consciousness, increase the grace of God, or whatever terminology you want to use. They basically, through that intensity and consciousness, that consciousness within that receiver organizes and evolves the recipient. The consciousness does the work. So I like to say it's strictly between you and the God of your understanding, and all we're doing is basically making that connection stronger. Kind of like, an internet connection, right? You have a lower level of connection where you're able to do a lot less things in your life, right? You have issues loading pages. You can't run softwares or programs on that, tablet or computer or a phone, right? It's very difficult to function in that state of lower levels of consciousness or low levels of internet access. When you boost that internet connection, right, you're able to harness more, right? More data. And as a result, you can process things faster. You have more opportunities, more things available to you that you didn't have access to before, right? So that's essentially what's happening here, is we are facilitators, right? We're like internet providers. But what I do like to say is those who are wanting to go about it alone, it's not impossible, right? It simply is a requirement for you to evolve in consciousness to have something called purity and innocence. That's it. You become completely impure and innocent, right? And the Bible I grew up reading, Jesus always talks about you have to be pure and innocent like a child. Well, that is a fundamental truth across all major religions, I'd say, is that there's this sense of purity and innocence, this sense of childlike connection to God as the authority, this complete humility and surrender, this trust, like a child has trust in your mother or father. A child can have trust in that authority and know that they're taken care of and not question that authority, right? Not challenge it, not say, always understand that you're in the right place at the right time, that you're taken care of. right? That purity and that innocence, some people, lose it over the course of their lives. I like to say most people have it throughout their childhood, but they lose it over the course of their lives as they grow up, as they age, as they, fall victim to the nature of this world and its trials and tribulations. They kind of lose that connection a bit in the same way, like, when I was growing up, I had those experiences very strongly from my childhood. And I still had them as I went through puberty and everything, but I felt like, a little disconnected. I felt a little bit of that pull away. Something shifted, something changed. And I think it was simply living in the world that we live in. And so that is the greatest way for us to be a better conductor for this energy, is to, discipline our lives with, we could say the Sanatana Dharma, the Dharma of the divine, the true reality of our existence, to understand what makes things work. It's not our efforts. It is God alone that does everything. And to establish that connection between us and the divine. But if we have trouble, retaining that purity or innocence, or restoring it within our beings, or if we do have it, but we're still finding difficulty evolving our consciousness, then that's where we come in. That's where organization is here for, to assist those people, to help them, to evolve them so that they can truly enjoy a better quality of life and just be happy and grow.
So there are two ways of doing it, as much as I understood. Like one who's just receiving to improve the quality of life,
right,
and the other who wants to be the the giver, or to get that higher level of consciousness to heal others. Is it like that, or you are only at the receiving end?
No, because I feel also to a certain degree there is a level of ego when we get involved with, I want to heal the world. It's like, I want to be the one that does it. And there's also this sense of, God's not in control. And I'm like, God is part of our life. God is inherent. God is the very foundation of our existence. God's not on vacation. So there needs to be this level of trust that's restored. And I think that's why so many struggles and issues that we see that are so prevalent in our modern day society persist, is because we've forgotten about God. We focus so much on modalities and tricks and techniques. They're rampant, where we're overwhelmed by choices, but none of them give us this type of outcome. This only comes through God. God is the one that created consciousness. God is the one that gives life to everything. It's like we've forgotten the very thing that has given us life, right? We insist that our efforts make a difference, that our efforts like somehow influence God. Like we can persuade God to do better. But it's something like that, where it's more of just returning to innocence, returning to purity. That's the true key to transformation, is innocence and purity. And we see that reflected in especially like the testimonials and the type of outcomes people get when they come to us. We see that the greatest people who are conductors or recipients of this energy are usually two groups of people. All of them experience incredible outcomes, but two of them sometimes, reach levels beyond everybody else. And those are children and women. Women are great conductors for this energy. They're very receptive to this kind of energy, to this divine blessing. And that goes into the nature of a woman herself and what a woman is. And, all of the issues we face today, it's like, it's because we've become so disconnected about our nature and who we are and what society has told us. It's like, even if we can go into a little talk about women, for example, women's journey is very turbulent. Right? It's not been easy. Would you say it's easy to be a woman, or is it easier to be a man?
I think it is easier to be a man.
It is probably easier to be a man, unfortunately. But what's the issue with women? What are we facing here? So there are so many different problems that women have in our modern day and age. And one of the reasons is because women have always been seen scientifically, even in modern medicine, right, are all scientific basis. All of our studies on women have been done basically assuming that we are men, that our biologies are synonymous to a man's biology. Most studies in the past, scientific studies in the past, have been conducted on men's biologies, not on women's. And so there's a point in our time where we're treated like, men with breasts. They're like, oh, that's the only difference between women and men. There is a very structural, biological, even difference in consciousness between men and women. We're very different from each other.
Our brain structure is different.
Everything's different. And to assume that is, first of all, we have been completely disregarded, right? And overlooked. And, historically, whenever a woman goes through issues, we experience things on many different dimensions, right? So we experience things, and I'm talking about spiritual woo dimension. I'm talking about like dimensions of being, like emotional, physical, mental, all those different levels. And so we're reaching all these issues with our biology, right? Where we're having issues with our menstrual cycles that we're taught are normal. You go to a doctor, you have heavy bleeding, you have all these different issues. A lot of time where doctor will just tell you to suck it up. A lot of time a doctor will just tell you that's what it's like to be a woman. Your period's supposed to last this long. It's supposed to be heavy. Pain comes with it. Mood swings are natural. All of these things are normal cycles that women have to go through, right? Right, menstruation and menopause, they're intelligent cycles of nature that have been so intelligently developed by nature itself. Why do they cause such suffering for us? Why are they so problematic for our lives? You go through menopause and it's like, you lose something incredible in your life. You lose, not just losing your fertility, but you lose your sanity sometimes. These women, their journeys through menopause, right? They don't even feel human anymore. They feel like they've lost their vitality. They've lost their energy. They go through all these horrible experiences that they don't need to go through. And that's the most painful thing, is women don't need to suffer in this way. But sacrifice and suffering has almost been so inherent to the definition of a woman itself that we almost just accept it.
Yeah, we've just about started talking about, menopause to be something that women need to talk about more, rather than it's a part of life, rather than, also pain during periods, which I came to know very, very recently, that is not normal. If your body is all the hormones are right if everything is functioning correctly, you are not supposed to have such painful periods. Right. It starts getting painful when things are not right. So these are certain things that I learned with my life as and when I went through those phases. But even before, structurally, I would say, as a society, it was already fed into me that, pain is normal. Right. And when I used to see other women, suffering from painful periods, I used to feel, yeah, they are different. I don't have pain. I don't know why. Maybe I'm different. Right. Because pain is supposed to be normal. Maybe I am different. Yeah. So, yeah, that's something I came to know much later, when I was diagnosed with endometriosis, adenomyosis, much later. Right. That's when I came to, and I started getting painful periods. That's when I came to know the sufferings of women who have, all throughout my school days, when they used to say that, oh my God, we are not able to function all these days because of painful periods. Right. And because it's set to be so normal, and when you discuss about it, you're like, what's the big deal in it? Of course it's painful. Of course everybody goes through it. Right. Yeah, so why are you even talking about it?
And all these women are reflecting the same experience you have with like pain, or like, okay, I don't have that, but you have that, but she has that. So it's like there's so many variabilities with women's menstruation and women's health that a lot of them are accepted as normal, and we're just like, okay, that's just how it is for women, right? We're poorly misunderstood biologically, hormonally, right? All these different areas, but also like you touched upon a really important point, that when your hormones are in perfect order, right, you don't experience the severity of a lot of these symptoms that we go through with menstruation and menopause. Yeah. Right. But here's the thing. It's like, do you really think that nature is such a poor designer of women's bodies that our hormones need to be so severely micromanaged and controlled in such a way that we need external sources of support to be able to do that? Like, shouldn't our bodies just know what to do? If it's such a natural part of life, like, why do we have to, take this hormone and take this drug and do things in this way, right? It's a clear indication that there's something wrong, not with women specifically, but we're always told that it's our fault. Somehow we're the ones that are blamed for it, right? If our moods are out of control, we're the ones that are blamed. If we're the ones irritable, if we have heavy bleeding, all these things, we're just like, that's just what it's like to be you. Like, we're almost blamed for a system that has failed to address us properly, right? And so as a result, we live with this nurturing, this upbringing, where we're taught to question our own intelligence and question our own intuition, where something is a red flag that's like blaringly obvious, telling us something's wrong. Like, women who had problems with mood swings and things during their periods, or slight alterations in their, emotional state or mental state, were thrown into institutions in the past. They were considered hysteria. It was a diagnosable disorder, hysteria. Things that women have walking around day to day, they're not in mental institutions. Those were institutionalized back in the day, right? Because they were so poorly understood.
I mean, not back in the days. I have had a podcast with somebody. She's a birthing expert,
right.
And she told me the story of a couple, a man who understood his wife during the pregnancy, during his wife's course of pregnancy, and he then understood his mother, who was confined into a room throughout his life, and he had known that his mother is not normal, suffers from some kind of some psychological problem. So she was always confined in a room because when her mother gave birth to a child before him, and it was some kind of postpartum depression that she was going through, that she threw the child into the well, thinking of something, whatever, thinking of something. Instead of addressing the whole thing as postpartum depression, she was termed as schizophrenic or something that the society labeled her as, and has always put her into a confinement. And the second child was born, and he has grown up to seeing and knowing that his mother is not well. And he came to know, he understood his mom when his wife was pregnant. He went with her throughout the pregnancy journey, and he confessed that I never really understood my mom. And that's how even our society is, even till today.
Yeah.
So, just imagine, across the seat, that kind of changed how we look at people. I mean, how our hormones, how our state of being in different phases of our life can actually guide us mentally. Mm-hmm. And how the society then thinks about it in their own way, and how they term women in different ways. I mean, how every month gives us a different kind of mood. Every day we have a different kind of mood. How, postpartum, like even after pregnancy, a woman goes through so much. Right. And it is not spoken. And it is very, 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 very recently, I think people are talking about it.
Yes. It needs to be talked about. Like, these women need to know that they're not crazy. And this is something that's truly, from my context and the context of what our organization does, it's abnormal. These situations, right, well, they're common. It's abnormal. And I want to give that some perspective. When you look at the nature of women and what women are, right, women, like I said, they're great receivers for this energy. Well, it makes you look at what a woman really is and their nature. If you actually look at the amount of women who have issues with their menstrual cycle, for example, right, people diagnosed with PCOS or endometriosis or like a specific disorder related to their menstrual cycle, that's maybe composed of around 30% of women. Okay? Women who actually have menstrual cycle problems, not just diagnosable disorders, but the ones that are overlooked that are taught to be normal, this heavy bleeding, cramping, bloating, right? All those issues. People who have difficult periods, right? Difficult menstruation. That's nearly 75% of women. That is a massive number, right? That is not normal for 75% of the entire world's population to suffer that greatly from their own menstruation, from their own biology, right? Interfering with their quality of life. That should not happen. And so when we're looking at what a woman is, we look at, okay, their nature. If somebody were to describe a woman, whether it's a man or woman or whomever, they usually describe them in various reasons, but we're always labeled as emotional, very sensitive beings. Well, this emotional insensitivity, because it's not understood, it's always, laughed at, or it's always not taken very seriously. It's always, addressed as something very impractical. We're called impractical. We're called illogical. Right? All these things are applied to women because they're not understood at the level of consciousness and at the level of biology itself. Right? So we're given these labels that have nothing to do with the truth, but have begun to become our own identities, that we are emotional, we are illogical, we are impractical. And so we start to believe them as well. And we start to deny our own intelligence because we're saying, well, maybe I'm just getting too emotional, or maybe this is, my own sensitivity. Maybe I'm not perceiving this correctly. We doubt our own intuition, right? And you hear of a woman's intuition, right? We're powerful intuitives. We sense things before they happen. We know what's happening with family members. We call them and say, what's wrong, right? All those things are inherent to being a woman. So we have this natural sensitivity, which is our greatest strength and our greatest weakness, right? So our greatest strength is that it's our ability to really connect. It's our ability to facilitate, to harness this type of energy. That's the power of that sensitivity, right? When it's placed in the wrong environment, right, it becomes damage for us. It becomes a reflection of the toxicity within that environment. So take, for example, if you look at all the ecosystems that exist, butterflies and frogs, I like to use as examples, right? You take the most delicate, very intelligent beings, right? Their biology, everything about them, very perfectly orchestrated and designed by nature, but you throw them into a toxic environment, butterflies die off before food chains unravel. They're the first indication that something is wrong with your food chain, right, within the ecosystem. Frogs die off before toxic chemicals are even measurable by human technology, right? So these are highly sensitive beings that suffer first when something's wrong. That's what women are experiencing in our modern day and age. We are so susceptible to these slight, minute changes, which is what our biologies have adapted to be able to do. I mean, we need to adapt to these incredible changes in hormones and in giving birth, fertility, menstruation. These are very intricate, very sensitive transitions throughout all of our life. We work cyclically, just like nature works.
I want to also understand, can destiny be altered?
Absolutely. That's what you see with all these things happening. It's like when a material, right, when they change their physical constants, right? When all these things change, you see the atom change, the structure, isotopic abundance, you see physical constant change. It's a new material now. It's not the same material it was before. It's living a new destiny. It is now more valuable. It's more beneficial. It's able to become more efficient and utilized by our technology and our systems at a better level, right? It's like the difference between an iron and a magnetic piece of iron, right? They're living two different destinies, two different paths. The same people in our clinical trial, it's like the life from baseline to the life at day 180 are two different lives. If they continued without the blessing, they would live one life. If they continued with the blessing, they live a completely different life. So this is transforming destiny.
Distort the ecosystem. Like if the destiny of A was supposed to be this, like what we see in films, what we see in certain films, that this was supposed to happen, but then, the destiny got altered. So the whole ecosystem changed.
Like I said, the energy is very intelligent, It has this inherent intelligence. It knows your problems better than I do. I'm not the one praying for a specific outcome for you. I'm simply asking God's grace, right? God to bless you. I'm asking. It's a prayer, a request to the divine, right? And through that higher level of consciousness, everything happens. Consciousness knows what to do. It treats everybody differently. It knows your problems unique to you and what you need for your greatest happiness. And it addresses everybody appropriately. Like I said, you bless a seed, and the blessing knows how to treat the environment around the seed to support it, right? We're talking about like this web matrix where you influence one destiny and everything else gets ruined as a result. Well, everything else gets uplifted as a result, what we've seen. There is no evidence to support otherwise. And I love this example too. This was back in 2002 where, again, Guruji, my husband, right? He did an experiment in 2002 on a bunch of 9,000 cashew samplings, right? And this was on a plot of 106 acres of land, right? And so he already blessed the crop. He already blessed the land, right? Resulted in this huge outcome. Like I said, double shelf life, this huge amount of yield, right? All this huge, beautiful plants comparison to the control group, these lush green, foliage, and it looked like a completely different crop by the end of it in comparison to the control. Now, the scientists had a different request from him. The scientist said, "Can you remove the blessing?" And he said, "Well, I can." And he said, "That's a really good way." The scientist said, "That's a really good way to show, the effect of the blessing and what happens when the blessing's not there. It's a great scientific protocol to measure, the blessing and its effects." And so he was like, "Okay, then I will remove the blessing." And so he removed the blessing from the same crop he blessed. Within 75 days, those trees looked worse. Absolutely worse than the control. They were ridden with pests, bacteria, viruses. The leaves started to shrivel. They started to fall. The fruit was no longer there anymore. Everything was dying and deteriorating, right? All problems, all chaos, all these things exist from lower levels of consciousness, not higher levels. Higher levels does not create chaos, does not create, problems with destiny. It improves destiny and it benefits all. Like I said, you bless the crop and everything. The whole environment changes in a beneficial way, never in a negative way. The harmful effects we see from quality of life is indications of a low level of consciousness, not a higher level of consciousness. So the same crop after 75 days is just completely overridden, with disease and pestilence and all these different things. And the scientist said, "Okay, can you please restore them back to what they were before? Can you bless them again?" He blessed them again and again. They came back to their former glory when they received the blessing the first time, back to great levels of fruition, higher yield, higher quality of produce, untouched by pests, higher immunity. It's like life came back to it. This life, right? Higher consciousness is balance, it's order, right? That's what consciousness does. It organizes and evolves, not disorganizes and devolves. That's low levels of consciousness. So that's a perfect experiment that shows the difference between low levels of consciousness and higher levels. One destiny of that crop versus the other destiny of that crop.
But now I really want to know, when somebody is enrolled into your organization to receive blessing,
right.
So, that is like for lifetime, or when they, is there?
As long as you want. I mean, we
Whether the blessing is for lifetime or you need to keep getting the blessings every year to...
It depends what you want in your life. It honestly does. If there's like one problem that you need fixed, one blessing might be enough to fix that. And if that's all you want in your life, that's fine. Some people might come and they just want one thing fixed. A blessing will fix it, and then they'll be on their merry way, right? It's not required for that problem to stay out of their life for them to keep getting blessings for that one problem, right? So, but what we have seen is that evolution never stops. Evolution continues. Life continues. right? When evolution stops or slows down, we regress. Energy always is moving. It's always progressing. Transformation is continuous, right? You take a seed, right, and you cover a seed up, and you never let it plant itself in the soil and get watered and grow. What happens to the seed over time? Eventually it deteriorates. It loses its potency, right? It becomes a husk of nothing. You try and plant it 6 years later, it's probably not going to produce anything. Right? So transformation is inherent to life. And the beauty of it is it seems that humans don't have a limit. That's why enlightenment is possible. Humans can continue to evolve beyond limits that we have even conceived of. Like I've said many times before, enlightenment isn't an end point. It's a continuation. It's a beginning for many. And so this is not something that you really stop unless you only want some of those short-term benefits. They're long-term, but just like a quick fix for something. And some people, that's all they want. But some people, we have the same clients that have been with us since 2009, 10, and 11, and they've stayed with us. It's now 2026, right? Nearly 15 years. And they've stayed with us, not because they have the same problems that they had in 2009, but because for them, this is life. Every time they're part of these memberships, they get more blessings. They experience life at a level that they didn't experience before. Their life continues to evolve and grow and transform, and they can't imagine their life without it. It's like they just don't want to live without it. So it's kind of like, it just depends how far you want to go. That's it. It's not to say that there's a limit that one blessing can do, but, if your growth is limitless, a lot of people don't want to stop at one.
Is karma a biological memory?
It can be, yeah. Karma, I think, can be reflected everywhere. In your DNA, in your biology, it can be reflected in your behavior, your character, all those things. Yeah, why not?
Also, do negative people drain off your energy?
Absolutely. You can definitely have people around you. And we've seen this too, where, the right environment can help people facilitate transformation even faster. And the wrong environment can hinder that progress a little.
I've understood. Do you think the supplements or the wellness industry, it's just confusing people, or is it unnecessary?
I think it's confusing people. I think it's promoting pseudoscience and a lot of harmful practices out there. I feel it's a lot of misinformation. I feel there are a lot of people with good intentions, but we have a saying that we like to repeat here, which is, what if a cobra bites you with good intentions, right? The poison's still there. A lot of misinformation with good intentions can end up debilitating for people. It can harm people. It can, even just having that poor nurturing, can lead you in wrong directions, incorrect paths in life, right? That is enough to completely throw somebody off. And then you have some things that maybe can provide, but not to the same degree that we've been able to see when you use consciousness as the conductor of change, the conductor of transformation here. So the wellness industry might have maybe some limited options, but they're, like I said, very limited. They oftentimes take a lot of time, and they don't produce the same level of outcome, and a lot of them are actually harmful.
So how different is manifestation from the consciousness?
Consciousness manifests new realities when you live in new states of consciousness. So when you're in this level of consciousness, everything from this level of consciousness is your reality. That's what you attract in your life. Right? From this level of consciousness, right, you're resonant. There's the theory of resonance, right, where you have tuning forks, and if they match the same frequency at each other, you hit one tuning fork, the other one will vibrate at the same capacity with the same tone, right? In the same way, at this level of consciousness, right, this is your oscillation, this is your state of being. All these things exist within that state. From lower level parameters of life, you have options from, 0 to 5. 5 at best, 0 at worst. So you don't have a lot of options. You have, bad or worse sometimes. And then you evolve your consciousness. It's like you're experiencing a new destiny, right? A new level of grace. You've transformed or transcended your old destiny. Now you have new things you attract into your life. That is the real law of attraction, is when things change at the level of consciousness, the things that come into your life are vastly different. And higher levels promotes better things. You have better prosperity, more harmonious relationships. You have better, finances, better job opportunities. You have a better perception. All these things come. Good quality, life. You have mental and emotional peace, mental, emotional bliss, right? All these things come from different levels of consciousness. So the law of attraction has to come from consciousness first, not attraction first. People try the opposite. Attract first. Consciousness changes. It doesn't work like that. And then you see, it's like Einstein has this famous quote. He says, nothing can be changed at the same level of consciousness that created it. Right? You want to change something in your life. You can't change things from the same operation you're living within. The same program that you're living on cannot change that same program. You have to work with the programmer, right? So like I said, the DNA of your DNA. This is the DNA of your life. It's your whole life blueprint laid out before you that outlines from birth to your journey through life to your death, the way you'll die, the way you're born, right? Even the way we're born. They say that even before birth, right, the way we think, our neurons, everything is already formed before our ability to even experience any nurturing. Before nurturing even develops, the way we think and the way our perception is formed is already dictated by our biology, by our DNA, right? And like I said, a lot of DNA is passed on genetically as well from, ancestors, from our parents, from people before us. So how much of this is within our control? Right? We have parts of the brain that are so unconscious, we don't even know how it's formulating our opinions. Whatever comes as a conscious thought is maybe only a fraction of the operations within the totality of the mind. A majority of it, like 98% of it, is unconscious. How much of that is within our control? Right? You're basically pushing a boulder up a mountain, assuming you can do it, and a lot of people are confused when they get run over by the boulder. Or they're able to somehow push it up like a tiny fraction of a mountain. They're like, see what I was able to do? You could do the same thing I can do. That's what we see a lot of the time. Like all these personal and transformational leaders, they have maybe 2% or 8% success stories. They take success stories, put them on a pedestal, the ones that match with their hypotheses, and they use that. They're cherry picking their data. So they're saying, this could be you. So we live because we've heard a few success stories and we think that, what if I could be one of those people? And we get confused when we're not, or we feel like there's something wrong with us. We're not trying hard enough. We're not practicing the right thing. We didn't implement the technique properly. There's something wrong that we did, or no, we need to do it this way, not this way. It's like all these things is just confusion that we have been so trained that we need to develop a technique or that we need to practice or do something constantly. It's like it's so unnatural to be constantly trying to implement tricks and practices and techniques to develop our minds and our lives when it is so inherently natural to consciousness and nature itself to be able to do that. If you can utilize that power to transform your mind, to develop yourself, to improve your biology and your quality of life, that has more capabilities, more potency than anything else you could probably do in your life.
So about changing of programming, I want to understand. Sometimes we are born with a different kind of programming. We are taught different things in our childhood, that we must eat this, we must live a certain way. And as we grow our own knowledge, we shift a lot of our mindset. Mm-hmm. So we do a lot of change in the programming. I think where we change the way we eat. We start eating healthy. People who does, right. When you want to live differently, when you want to live a good quality life, you do some lifestyle changes. Right. So that I feel is change in the programming that happens in between, not what you have set, what the standards that you have set in the beginning of your life. So then by the time you are old, you are not actually following what the values or things that you are born with, or the first couple of years, you change it somewhere in between. So is that kind of a programming are we talking about here?
No. What you're talking about is, right, when we're given this
level of consciousness, right? You can operate from 0%, you can operate from maybe 10% at best. So you're talking about you're living one life at 0% and you've been able to transform to 10%. You're still living within that parameter of that level of consciousness. You have not transcended it. You've been able to live at the higher level of that parameter, but that's about it. There's so many studies that have been conducted on people, right, where you do one clinical trial, you measure, blood parameters and everything, and you get different outcomes. Well, let's say, for example, scientists are testing, the quality and how blueberries affect our quality of life, like their antioxidant properties, all these different things, right? Scientists will take that experiment conducted on one group of people, right, with blueberries as the treatment, right? Everybody will be eating blueberries, and, you'll say, wow, a majority of people experience this little tiny bit of improvement by eating blueberries and their antioxidant levels or, nutritional absorption or whatever it may be, right? And then they'll take those same studies and replicate them multiple times with different groups of people. And each one of those studies has a different outcome. Why? They blame that, blueberries and different people's biologies, but what they're missing is everybody's consciousness is different in each one of those groups. So your ability to absorb the nutrition, right, how blueberries affect you might affect you differently than it would affect somebody else, right? So your consciousness determines, right, you could be eating the best quality of food. You could be, trying the best path that everybody is applauding and perpetuating, right, and then nurturing you about saying that blueberries are a health food and you should be eating blueberries. You can eat blueberries and still get cancer. You can eat blueberries and still wake up in the morning feeling fatigued all day. You could still be following the best lifestyle and not be getting the same outcome that other people are getting, right? And on top of that, how much nutrition are you absorbing from your blueberries? Right, there's this concept called bioavailability, where that bioavailability, science has very limited options to be able to increase bioavailability to the extent that we've seen with these divine blessings, right? So bioavailability, our ability to absorb nutrition from the food we eat, right, is very limited within the scope of scientific research and medicine. So these things that we think that are changing our lives a lot, it might be changing things incrementally within those parameters, and we feel a difference and we confirm it and we're like, we feel better. We feel like we're doing something great. And yeah, within those parameters, you're doing good stuff. Those good things are actually happening. But what I'm talking about is I'm changing those parameters. Those things that are happening here are going to change when they're happening here. It's a new level of life. So what we're talking about are two very different concepts. So what might be happening there is a very smaller type of experience compared to what I'm saying the potency of consciousness is capable of doing for us on our behalf.
One emotion that blocks growth.
Trauma. Trauma is perhaps the biggest emotion that blocks growth. And a lot of psychologists believe that trauma is one of the things that you live with and die with, right? And like I said, trauma, lives within the body. But there's this example that we give about trauma, because trauma is your state of mind and how it, receives experience, right? Some people, experience trauma. Some people don't. They live the same exact life experience as somebody else. So what determines what will register as trauma for one person but not another? So, for example, let's take a woman who, was in a relationship with a man, and this is a woman from a lower level of consciousness, right? So if that man breaks up with her, right, or divorces her, something like that happens, but it's the man's decision, what's she going to experience from a lower level of consciousness, right? She's going to be traumatized, right? Parts of the trauma is she's going to feel fear of rejection. She feels rejected. The feelings of rejection, she feels unworthy. She feels like she's unlovable. Like she feels that she's not, competent, or there's something that's being said about her, right? That she can never find a good partner again, that was the only one that she could have, or she tried so hard and she got that one and now there's nothing else available for her. Or it's like, who knows if she'll be able to get as good as that in her life again, right? All those thoughts and feelings. She's suffering from mental restlessness, ADD, ADHD. All of these mental health issues perpetuate from that trauma, right? That registers as trauma within the being from a lower level of consciousness. So you have all these things, anxiety, depression, all these things that, medical science has no answer to.
right? And so this leads to poor quality sleep, because who can sleep like that? Right? And there's no housekeeping in the brain that's done when you're living with poor quality sleep, because that's when your mind clears itself of all its unwanted thoughts and excess data and information. It consolidates memories. It integrates information so that you can think better, sharper, clearer. So you lose your cognitive prowess. You start to decline cognitively. This all reflects, of course, if your mind is not working appropriately, it's reflected in your body. You're one organism. Your mind, right? The brain operates and gets work done from all the other organs in your body. If your brain's not at full capacity, can you think your organs are? No. So all your organs start, debilitating. You get really sick. You get sick easily. It's very common when people experience trauma. They get sick more often than people who don't, right? And so all these different things start to happen in their lives. And it's all the root cause of trauma, which is ultimately stemming from a lower level of consciousness. Now, you take the same person, but make them coming from a higher level of consciousness. In the same scenario, a man breaks up with her, divorces her, whatever it may be, that person has confidence. From a higher level of consciousness, there's no trauma there, right? The level of perception that comes from higher levels of consciousness is that it's okay. He wasn't worth my time. God ended it now so that I could move on with my life and find the partner that I'm meant to be with, my soulmate, right? This is good. This is a blessing in disguise, right? This says nothing about me, right? I'm good. I have confidence. I have motivation. I'm ambitious. I'm ready to move on with my life, right? It doesn't register as trauma within their beings, not even the initial phase of it. They're unfazed, untouched by the world and its circumstances. There's an inner immunity. Like I said, those crops at higher levels of consciousness, they have 600%, up to 600% higher levels of immunity. That level of immunity is what prevents them from getting infested by those bacteria and viruses and those other disorders that the comparative crops have, the control crops. So same way, it's this spiritual immunity that we have from a higher level of consciousness. We have a spiritual immune system that prevents all these other things, these unwanted thoughts, these unwanted feelings, these unwanted circumstances to even touch us. We become untouchable by them. If they even enter by accident, they're easily managed and diffused by the brain. So it's like all of these things, right? We live our lives, being able to operate and control our circumstances instead of our circumstances feeling like it's always dominating and controlling us. It's a completely different life. You'd have to agree, right?
Absolutely. No, okay, fine. I'm absolutely really, really enlightened towards the end of our conversation, but I have two questions.
Please.
One is, do you think some certain human beings are more easily susceptible to receiving the consciousness while others aren't?
Children, very easy to receive and transform with this energy. We do have memberships for children too, but it's because of that purity and innocence. So the groups of people who have more of that character of innocence within them, that's already inbuilt or they haven't lost. Why did it only take me less than a year to grow? It's because I led my life and I wanted to retain that innocence. I knew that was my connection to God, was this purity in my heart, this love for God. And so I led my life making sure that stayed with me. And so no matter what life threw at me, it's like I was able to somehow maintain that innocence. By the grace of God, I don't know how, but somehow it happened for me. And that's why my evolution was so quick. It took me less than a year. And now I'm able to do what my husband's able to do, right? My guru. And so it's like, people who have that level of innocence and purity, it's innate. They transform very quickly with this energy, far quicker than people who don't have those characters. But the beauty of this energy is it can help you develop that innocence and purity. If you're sincere, if you're disciplined and sincere, and that's what you want, this blessing can help facilitate that as well. And so, but children, they're already kind of in touch with that blueprint that they're born with, where, it's like you just look at a child and you're just kind of like, oh, it's like, it's so, sweet to see a child and to see their awe and their wonder. We think they're ignorant and ignorance is bliss, but really their minds are open. Their minds are full of awe. They have no fear, right? They have nothing to worry about, no stress in their life. That's living in purity and innocence, is like untouched by that stress and that fear that we live with as adults. And, we learn to
we tailor our lives in a way that become most effective for us. Like for women in their journey, we've learned to disregard and suppress parts of ourselves because it's not understood by society. It's not appreciated. It's undervalued. It's stigmatized, right? It's treated as we're less than if we're emotional or characters like that, when in reality, it's intelligence. It's a display of an inherent intelligence, right? And a sensitivity to our environment, right? We're reflectors of a very intelligent system, and we're great conduits for this energy as well. That natural purity within us, that it makes us so susceptible to damage, but at the same time, so receptive to growth and transformation as well. So I would say these two groups of people are probably the easiest, right, in terms of how far and quickly they can grow. But honestly, this is a nature that's innate in men as well, right? It's just easier for women. It just somehow is more innate in them. It's different in the structure of their being somehow. But men, it's inherent there as well. But it's just they're not as in touch with it inherently as women are. But a lot of men who are more evolved, they're more in touch with it. They definitely are able to, be in tune with that sensitivity and transform very quickly as a result. So it really is all coming down to that purity and that innocence. It's not really a particular type or group of people. Like I said, this works on atheists. This works on people from all religions. We don't have a specific religion that we adopt or implement. We don't enforce or, engage with any type of practice or ritual or dogma. We're not promoting one religion, we're not disregarding another either. We're welcoming of all types of religions, and we're not telling you to implement anything or to stop doing anything. We're simply saying, evolve your consciousness. And we see people who are part of a religion, they feel more connected to their religion afterwards. So this is something that's quite universal, that's available for all kinds of people from all different backgrounds. It doesn't seem to matter what your background is or who you are as a person. Everybody's capable of evolving and transforming with this consciousness, this energy.
My last question is, India is considered to be a God-fearing country where people, the moment somebody is healed or anything, any kind of, something like magic happens, people in India believes more, and your husband, your guru, is Indian. So why is your organization not here, and why isn't he practicing here?
Well, it is. It's most of the work that we do is actually remote. So, we have clients from all over the world. We have clients in India. We have clients in Germany and Europe. We have clients in Romania. We have clients in Canada, the United States, Mexico, literally all over the world. We're on multiple different continents. So there's not really, when you can do something like with the clinical trial, it can be conducted remotely. When you can conduct something remotely, it's like we probably intend to in the future to have, multiple centers throughout the world, but it's not a requirement for you to receive the blessing and get a benefit is to come in person and join a center or anything like that. It can all be done remotely. So, we do have, multiple different bases. One of them is in Texas, the other one's in Florida, and we kind of have a basis in Mumbai as well. So it's not like we're not in India. Like obviously we travel and come here all the time. Guruji has a huge number of followers here in Mumbai. So we do have a basis here as well. So people can, come and experience it in Mumbai. It's not, privy to only one location. So
lovely. So it was an amazing conversation. I mean, it just started with a very small mail. I mean, where you connected, we connected, and the whole thing. And I feel that it's the divine energy that leads one thing into another. And maybe we were destined to meet and talk about it at length today. And I've never had such a long podcast. I've always, shuffled through questions, but today I really wanted to listen to what you were saying, and I thoroughly enjoyed it. And yes, of course, we all believe in miracles, but if miracles is backed by science, then there's nothing more than we can ask for. And when it is the question of humanity, being just the life of human being uplifted, then why not?
Right.
And maybe I'm just the medium for a lot of more people to, understand it and just benefit from it. And I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you enjoyed it, all of you. And so write in the comments below. I'm sure I will put everything down in the below the video for you to get in touch with and understand it further. And I will try to keep as much of the conversation that we had today in the podcast, so that there is no question. And I think I kind of asked kind of everything, the doubts, the uncomfortable questions, and everything. So you can listen to this podcast on all major audio platforms, starting from Spotify to everything. And if you like this conversation today, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to the Debinna Decodes. And thank you so much.
You're our most gracious host. Thank you for your time. It was an absolute pleasure to talk to you.
Thank you so much. It's my pleasure.